Sarah, what are you seeing so far?
That's right, Kate. Essentially what we have gotten here is only a couple of pages from the report. As they were just saying, the judge is holding a lot of this back, including the recommendations on whether anyone should be charged with certain crimes. But the one section they did release is, frankly, just a paragraph on the grand jury's belief that witnesses lied before them. In this paragraph, they recommend that the Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, consider indicting some of these witnesses for perjury. So this section of the report says the grand jury recommends that the district attorney seek appropriate indictments for such crimes where the evidence is compelling. So this kind of gives you a sense of the tone of the grand jury, the belief that there were witnesses that came before them that lied under oath, and their suggestion to the district attorney, because it's ultimately up to her whether she's going to pursue indictments, that there may be indictments worth pursuing when it comes to this perjury question. Now, again, we're not seeing what their broader recommendations were. We're not seeing the names of witnesses that they believed may have lied, but that's important. They also wrote in this report that they believe unanimously that there was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election in Georgia that could have upended the results. Obviously, a lot of people around the former president have contended that there was fraud despite the lack of evidence there. And they point out that they heard from some witnesses who were still adamant that there was this kind of fraud in the 2020 election, Kate.
Interesting. Sarah, stick with me, if you will, because, Patricia, this question and this paragraph, I've got a hard copy of, as Sarah's perfectly describing, the very limited amount that's coming forward, and it says that the majority of the grand jury believes that perjury may have been committed by one or more witnesses testifying before it. And I know that you were thinking, kind of going into this could be one of the most interesting parts of what could coming out. What do you think what do you think it means? There are no names. We're not getting any names here, obviously.
Well, first of all, it lets us know that this process is going forward. It looks like if there's been this recommendation, that's certainly something that Fani Willis will take very seriously. And that's an entire bucket of potential charges above and beyond other recommendations that may have been made by this special grand jury. But something that Michael Moore said is so true. It's so important. There is no playbook for what we are seeing here. There has never been a president indicted on criminal charges before. We certainly have never had this kind of finding that there was no widespread fraud, followed by these layers and layers and layers of actions by a former president and his associates. And when you look at the list of witnesses who went before this grand jury, the governor, the secretary of state, multiple state lawmakers, Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, Cassidy Hutchison, his own assistant up there in the White House, we start to get a glimpse of just how broad and serious the situation is. Some of those witnesses were there to say, I don't think anything happened, and I don't believe there was fraud, and here's what else I know. Others were named as targets in this investigation as well. And when Fani Willis asked that this report be kept mostly under wraps, which is exactly what we're seeing here today, she said she wanted to protect the due process rights of potential future defendants. And I think we are starting to see here that we are going to expect future defendants in this situation, more than likely.
Michael, what do you think about that?
I think she's exactly right. I don't think there's any question that we're going to see indictments come out of this investigation. I think that the DA wouldn't have had the time and treasure invested into the case to be at this place. Now, whether or not she decides to proceed on the perjury charges, I think that's an interesting way to go. I think that may be tougher. But it strikes me that she's probably going to really take these recommendations, take the testimony that she's gotten. She probably bolstered up the evidence that she needed that surrounded that call that Trump made to the Secretary of State at the time, looking for those votes. And I think at that point now she's going to move forward. So I don't know how broad the net will be. But, we do have key players who she has subpoenaed. And I think you're going to have folks who both may have told half-truths and complete falsehoods when they testified and gave testimony before the General Assembly committees that were looking into this. And you may also have people who made false statements, or the grand jury at least believe made false statements to them. And so that compounds the investigation. So again, whether she looks at a few potential targets, sort of the key players, does she just try to indict the quarterback, or does she go down and try to indict the whole team? I don't know how deep she'll go. She's got to be thinking, though, I need to both be able to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, which would be the criminal standard. And if I get a conviction, if a court lets me move forward based on all the motions that we're going to see. If I get a conviction, can I support that conviction on appeal in this state? And she's weighing those things out at the same time. So hopefully, her comments about the indictments being imminent or decisions being imminent, we'll see those in relatively short order.
Yep, they feel more imminent today as portions of this are now being released, that's for sure. Sarah, you have some more reporting. What are you hearing?
Well, yeah, I think, as everyone was just talking about, a lot of the tone that we've heard from the district attorney, from the judge in this case, the sort of tone we're getting from this very limited amount of information from the special grand jury's report suggests that indictments are likely. And I think, a lot of all of this just points to how much deference there is being given to the district attorney in this case. If you look at the conclusion, again, which was one of the portions of this released, the special grand jury makes sure that they want to point out that if they failed to include any violations, they say we acknowledge the discretion of the district attorney to seek indictments where she finds sufficient cause. So essentially what they're saying here is, in the portions that we are not seeing, but that they have written, we've made a number of recommendations of who, if anyone, should face criminal charges. But they're saying in this conclusion, look, if there's anything we missed, we are not legal experts. If there's something we missed in the statute, if there's some crime that was committed that somehow evaded us during this investigation, but where the district attorney believes there is enough evidence to pursue another indictment, we defer to her. She should go forward and do this. So I think, that's just sort of setting up the landscape for as we move forward, what will the district attorney do and how closely will it align to what the special grand jury has recommended.
And Sarah, this might speak to kind of one thing that I know everyone was looking to when this came out, which was what is the kind of overall tone of the parts of the report that were released, since we know so much is going to be, was going to be and clearly is being held back. Is that kind of the takeaway that you see so far, is just like this amount of deference? I also do, you pointed to it, and I just want to make sure, for the statement of history, Sarah, what you said is that in this, I think this is from the opening of the grand jury report, where they lay out very clearly that the grand jury heard extensive testimony on the subject of alleged election fraud from poll workers, investigators, technical experts, and state of Georgia employees and officials, as well as from persons still claiming that such fraud took place. And we find by a unanimous vote that no widespread fraud took place in Georgia, in the Georgia 2020 presidential election that could result in overturning the election. I mean, it's an important statement just for historical purposes, Sarah.
It is an important statement, and I think what you're seeing here is we may not be getting the juiciest parts, right? What everyone really wants to see is what this special grand jury recommended as far as who, if anyone, should face crimes and on what basis. But what we are getting here is sort of an outline of how they approached this, how seriously they undertook this. They lay out, we heard from 75 witnesses. We heard from people who are technical experts in this case. We heard from people who still want to make the inaccurate claim that there was this widespread fraud. And we have reached what, the special grand jury believes is this undeniable conclusion that there was no widespread fraud in the 2020 election, regardless of what the former president may be saying about this, regardless of what a number of his allies may be saying about this. And I think in that introduction, they're really laying out for the public, we did our homework here. This was not a surface level investigation. This was a deep dive with a number of witnesses all across the spectrum of election administration and as well as these public officials to reach this conclusion. And then again, in the conclusion, you get that deference to the DA, this notion that ultimately it's going to be up to Fani Willis to decide who she really believes she can make the case against. Is it everyone they may have recommended in this special grand jury report? Is it fewer than that, or could it potentially go even further than what this grand jury recommended?
Michael, what do you think about that?
Well, I think that this basically, if you think about it, sort of a one-sentence report, this is basically the grand jury saying, go get them, Madam District Attorney. We've looked at the evidence, we've heard from the witnesses, and we think that there's room for a case. So go get them. And it sounds like they're giving complete deference to her and to that decision. So remember that this grand jury does not have the power to indict. She has to now present that to a criminal grand jury who can basically take the summary of the report and consider the witness testimony, the statements that were made. They're not bound either by this special grand jury report, but this is basically, an affirmation that for the district attorney that the investigation should move forward. Now, again, she looks at it both from the facts and the law, and she'll have to take into consideration the court she may be in, what the jury pool is going to look like, all these things that will have to go into her decision. It doesn't mean that she doesn't enforce the law or move forward on matters brought before, but she has to think about these things, especially in a case of this magnitude, because we are in historical waters here. And so I think she'll be doing all that and has been doing it, frankly, over the last couple of years.